is my absolute pleasure to introduce Janine Silcock next, who you can see on the screen. She's getting organised. She's the principal at Ballina Coast High School, so we feel really, really privileged to have a local educator and such an esteemed one taking time to present here this evening. So Janine's been teaching for almost 40 years in public education, K-12, across New South Wales and internationally as well. So in the last 5 years, Janine has been responsible for leading the creation of the new school, Ballina Coast High, where the pedagogy is what has driven the design. So Janine's actually now completing her doctorate at SCU, which is loosely called Dancing in the Rain, also the title of her presentation this evening. So Janine was awarded one of 12 Australian Fellowship Awards in 2019 for her outstanding leadership. And she's presented nationally and internationally, and most recently in a webinar in Alberta, Canada, Board of Education on engaging students in COVID times. She's always enjoyed leaning into disruption, her words, and COVID gave her a real chance to shine in these times of really significant disruption for all of us. So her presentation this afternoon will tell us about her school story during these times of disruption. So that's enough from me, I think, Janine. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Megan. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land on which we meet tonight, which is from my myriad, it's the Bundjalung Nation, and pay my respect to elders past and present and to any Aboriginal people with us tonight. We're in a privileged position as teachers and educators to actually start this journey of growing the elders of the future. So I feel very honoured to be part of that journey. Ballina Coast High is actually an amalgamation of two local high schools, and it's interesting to note where Tony and David have been talking about the learning and where it's heading, and we've been on that path for well over the 5 years. So if you walked into Ballina Coast High School today, you would actually see some of the things that David and Tony have mentioned. When we started this journey, the idea was to provoke, to disrupt and to evoke the teachers in our school, the parents in our community and our students themselves to take more responsibility for their learning and to find a way. As practitioners, we wanted to do this by engaging our students in the conversation. So the first thing we did is we started talking about the pedagogy and what it is that we thought our views of education were. And the things that were really apparent in these early days. Now I'm going back to 2015. Some of you are probably just coming into teaching at that time, but we'd been very much a curriculum driven by content, and we were virtually given an identity as a school based on the outcomes of certain testing that was generic. So there was a real fear by teachers that they had to stick to the syllabus, that they had to maintain the outcomes, that they had to do the reporting as in New South Wales as an A to E, that you must report twice a year, and that everything must be done the way it had been done. And as a school, we recognised that over the last 200 years, the lives of our kids have changed remarkably, and we did not want to keep going and doing what had always been done. So, yep, we were being brave and we did challenge the system, and we didn't win all of it, but I would say we came close to about 90% of it, which we were happy with. So a couple of things I would say. If you walked into Ballina Coast High today, what is different? In our junior years, and that's our 7 to 9, our kids actually have an integrated curriculum. It's very much connected. And it's very much built on themes that the kids started picking about 4 years ago. Things like future-proofing our environment, which is really important to them, and it's on their mind. We started designing those units with the students, and we did cross-curricular. We took out a lot of content from our syllabuses, and we started doing our blended learning. So every student who came into our school starting in 2017 had to have their own device. And so 50% of our learning is online in a classroom supported by a teacher, and then 50% is the pen and paper version that many of us are still seeing in schools. So we were very different to a lot of other schools. So when COVID came, that really stood us well. Our kids knew their codes for their Google Classrooms. They knew that they could go off and do certain extension activities. They knew that they could do lots of other things that didn't rely on being teacher directed. So that happened around those early years. The other thing that happened was we gave our kids what we call voice and choice. They were allowed to pick units of work that they were interested in, and they could move in that direction. Our year 10, we threw out the whole, virtually the whole curriculum across New South Wales, because we realised that our kids had met all the mandatory hours by the end of year 9, except for a few hours here and there which we picked up. And so they had choice. So they actually entered their year 10 very much like a senior student. We did make mistakes. We had a research base that was plan, do, study, act, and we made some mistakes and we had to change things. But I guess the journey was about, and I say it all the time, failing forward. If we're failing forward, we're at least doing something. And so we threw the curriculum out, and a few weeks into the term, we realised our top kids hadn't taken an English type elective, and that wasn't going to stand them well for their senior years. So we had to go back and say to them, you need to do some English. It was important to going into the senior years. And we've changed that. We've morphed things as we've gone. So our kids actually do have to do English now in year 10. And now we've made them, God, I hate using that word, but we've encouraged them strongly because they have to. So I'm going to say it's like a democratic dictatorship. They get their choice, but we actually tell them what they really need to do. So they do have to do an English and maths. But virtually anything else, they can then do 4 sciences, 4 PEs. They can do any of the modules that they're really interested in. The other thing we wanted to give is all students some measure of choice about their learning. So we do have a thing called Flex. So kids can actually take a Flex unit that's not assessed, it's not programmed for, it's not reported on, it's just for the love of learning, a passion interest. And so our students do that as well. But the most important thing that our kids do is they have a learning coach, and this was adapted from lots of different things we saw in Alberta, Canada. Flex came from there. And so every student who comes into our school in year 7 is given a learning coach. There's a group of 15 to 20 kids with one teacher, and they see that teacher every day for 25 minutes to talk about their learning. And they talk about being self-regulatory. They talk about resilience. They talk about distilling information. They talk about being creative, and we give them tools with our language on how to do that. And they have that same learning coach for the next 6 years of schooling. So every day for 6 years, they see the same learning coach to look after them and to guide them and to be the link between them and their parents and the community. So it's a powerful relationship, and we're seeing that's really impacting well on our kids and our learning. So when COVID hit, obviously things like the online learning, blended learning, that was not a problem. Our kids, we were trying to keep them to the same timetable, but we found that we were actually expecting too much of them. We were expecting the parents to be the teachers. We were expecting our kids to stay on track, and that this whole world of COVID was really, really mentally a challenge for them. So what did? We took off the timetable for years 7 to 10, and we said, this is what you need to do over the course of the next week. You need to do, 3 hours. It was over the course of 2 weeks. You had to do 3 hours of English, some 3 hours of personal interest, 3 hours of maths, but they could do it wherever they liked. They could design their own timetable. And if they needed help on the time slots, we had teachers allocated who they could talk to through Zoom. They were also able, and we had 70 students who came every day during those times. They could come into the school at any time and touch base with an expert in the area that they were having difficulty with. We also continued to run our learning and support. So some of our most vulnerable kids, some kids who just couldn't be at home, came to school. We ran breakfast clubs. We ran a program called Food for Thought. We had workers in the school who couldn't teach because that wasn't their area of expertise, but they could make meals. So we were feeding our community as well. We're a school that's very much committed to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When they're all being met, then our kids can actually learn. But until that happens, it's very hard to make kids learn. So we really spend a lot of time on the wellbeing of our kids. But our core business is teaching and learning, and we try to maintain that focus. But over COVID, that was quite a difficult thing. We would have had about 82% of our kids engaging in the online and blended learning over that time. Some kids, someone mentioned about having laptops and internet access. We provided every student that needed in our senior years with a device and a dongle for the internet. We also provided opportunities for them to come in and work on site. With our years 7, 8, 9, 10, they had all been expected to have their own device, so it was not a problem. If parents didn't want them having screen time, we had learning packs available for them. So these were just some of the things that we did. We did a lot of communication through Facebook. We would put up recipes and activities to do. How many skips can you do? Get out of the house, talk to your parents, find out what their childhood was about. And as well as that, we had safe places for our students to connect to our school so that we didn't lose sight of them. We have students, as you can imagine, in any school who are really struggling in their home life. So we made sure that we had people dropping in with food packs or, sanitary items and things for our girls, underwear, all the things that it needs for kids to be happy and to be safe so that they could get on into the activity of learning. So we didn't really have to change dramatically. We had to rethink more about the kids' needs in their home environment, and we had to think more about the staff needs. Teachers are amazing, they just learn so quickly when they have to at a point of need. So they learnt to Zoom, and they learnt to do things with Microsoft Teams that they hadn't been doing. Google was very, very well known in our school, but there was just lots of things we had to learn to do with tracking and other things. So it was a whole new world. I'm mindful of your time, so I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions. Someone said about changing the world. Look, I actually think teachers are in a great place to do that every day. You make a difference to everyone's life every day if you give them the time. And I can tell you right now, I can name the teachers who changed my life and sent me on a different trajectory to the one I would have anticipated had I just depended on a couple of people in my life. So I hope people continue to really realise the impact that they have every day on our kids' lives, have high expectations, expect them to achieve greatness, expect them to discover vaccinations that hadn't been thought of, and they will lift, they will rise to the expectation. Be optimistic, love your job, and know that you can change the world one student at a time.
Thank you so much, Janine. There was so much information there. You've done so much work in that school. May has posted in the chat just wow, a really long wow as you were going through talking about everything that was made available to the students. Paul's written there, inspiring. One question that did come up here, Tony mentioned that we've noticed at university as well, but you probably have that, a lot more student anxiety with COVID. How do you feel? Do you feel that that's the case, or how have you dealt with that at your school?
No, I actually don't think that's the case. Kids they have a real bubble around them, and they're pretty happy. The people who were mainly impacted on were our year 12, worrying what was going to happen. And I have to say, they rolled with it when they knew that we had plans in place and that it was going to be okay. They weren't too bad. I don't see the mental health as much. What I do know is that domestic violence has risen in our community, and that's the thing I think we need to watch and be very mindful of. We know that our kids have lost some people, relatives, and we have to be mindful of that. But I honestly, I can't say we were a school that had a lot of mental health issues among our students anyway, so I don't believe that it's been increasing as a result of COVID. We just always had that big field of concern anyway.
Thank you so much. I'll just give everyone 1 minute if they'd like to post any more questions for Janine in the chat, seeing as we do have a principal from one of our local schools here. I did have a question, because there was a long list of what you've had to do as a school to do all of these things differently, to do them to a high standard. How did you go about working together as a team, or bringing your team of teachers together initially to instigate that change?
So we had two very different schools coming together. So there were a lot of schools a lot of different personalities coming together. And the first thing we did is we put up a compelling case for change, why it was important to seize the opportunity. Instead of having something done to us, what could we do and take advantage to make the world and the educational world a better place for our kids, given the opportunity to recreate the physical building, but we wanted it to be very much driven by the pedagogy. And so the first thing we did is we actually had a compelling case for change based on research from around the world. We also put up lots of possibilities that no one had ever thought about for a school. We put up a vision statement that we co-created with our parents and our kids, and we put up our 6 non-negotiables that we were never going to settle on anything. So when people wanted to argue about this much space or this sort of window, or locking our kids here, or we just said, well, these are our non-negotiable principles and we're holding to them, and we just stamped our feet and dug in for the long haul. And I would say, again, we won on a lot of those, but I'm actually really grey-haired about it. It's been hard work, but once you've got your vision, and we had what we called a mandate, and we have since changed it to what we call a movement, because it's never static. Everything we do is really about moving forward, and the key statement in that movement is we wanted to nurture our students and our staff to find the joy in learning. It wasn't about grades and outcomes. It was actually just about being happy and lifelong learners. So yeah, collaboration is, everything is collaborated in our school. Kids don't get a choice not to be collaborating. Everything is built on the foundation of collaborating. The school is actually, when we started designing it, we called it no halls, no walls, so you can't escape each other.
I think you've made some really good points right there at the end for us to finish on, actually, Janine. And you'll see in the chat there's some really great comments that can kind of support the fantastic work that you've been doing. Thank you so much, Janine, for coming along. I really appreciate you speaking this afternoon.